Hi there, guys. Just some ordinary dude here, and I'm once again joined by Alana. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good.
That's great. And today we're going to discuss a topic that's really quite overdue, considering that we're fans of the Loud House. Obviously, we've done podcast talks about characters like Laurie, Lenny, Lynn Jr., you know, various other sisters, and I think of a couple of other main characters, but we've never actually done one about Lincoln himself. And of course, he's the main character of the show. So there's plenty you can talk about there, but it's just never really come up with between me and all the guests I've had on this podcast series by now. We've been doing it for months and we've never really talked about Lincoln, so it is kind of weird, isn't it? But there you go.
Yeah.
Um,
But we're doing it now.
yeah, finally we're doing it. So, yeah, we're going to talk about Lincoln Ladd as a character and his role in the show, and just what we think of him as a character in it, I suppose. So, I suppose if we're going to talk about Lincoln, best place to start is the very first season, because obviously in season one he is pretty much the sole main character of every episode. That was how it was originally designed to be. Chris Savino, when he first came up with the show, it was very much about one boy, 10 girls, and he's outnumbered by his sisters a lot of the time. And naturally, that's going to, encompass him getting a lot of focus, him getting a lot of screen time. So if we start with season one, he's like the everyman. He's the jack of all stats, if you like, jack of all trades. He doesn't really have a particular interest, like a particular niche, except for, I guess, sort of being a bit of a geek. It's like the other sisters, they have their certain things about them. Luna's into music, Luana's into comedy, Lynn's into sports, Lucy's a goth, Lisa's a scientist, etc., etc. With Lincoln, he's just sort of like the average, like, young kid, slightly geeky, but he's not like got his own niche as such. But what he is, he's like the jack of all trades. So naturally, he can do a little bit of what each the sister can do, but he's not like an expert at it. Um, yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they didn't really show like a lot of his interest too much in season one. He mainly like was kind of trying to deal with like his sisters and all that.
Yeah, he
So
was
it wasn't really
basically
like yeah.
he was like reacting. He was a reacting character. Like he basically he'd be dealt a situation either by his sisters or his parents or whoever, by the family, and he'd just have to react to it and make a plan to deal with it. Essentially, was the plot of more or less every episode of season one.
Yeah, and most of the episodes in like season one, he would kind of like it'd have this like formula where he would kind of do something and then either have to learn some lesson or like maybe I don't know, learn to like appreciate his family more if that makes any sense. I don't know.
Yeah,
Stuff like that. And
yeah. It's
yeah,
one
just
as
like
well. Not in every episode, because there were some episodes where he doesn't particularly appreciate his family more. For example, one of the earliest episodes, Heavy Metal. Of course, in that
oh
episode,
yeah.
they're meddling around, and he ends the episode thinking, "No, I shouldn't have listened to you guys. I should have just done it my own way." And then obviously Ronnie threw the stake or whatever it was into his window, and he sort of ended the episode a bit happy anyway, despite being punched in the face.
Yeah, there's that one.
And but he's still like he doesn't always necessarily learn something. It depends on the episode. But sometimes I think a big part of the first season was that his sisters drove him a bit crazy. He still loved them. They were still fundamentally decent people, but sometimes the episodes were basically just the sisters make life a bit of a living hell for him. And sometimes that could be done well to the point where it was funny. Other times, like it, for example, in intense debate, for example, where they're all on different sides and he's got to choose. And of course, it really goes badly for him because he tries to manipulate the whole situation, only for it not to work out.
Oh
um,
yeah.
so you've got episodes like that where it can be done in a funny way. Then you've got episodes where it doesn't go so well. You got Stunning Muffin, one of the boys. A lot of people don't really like the greenhouse from this season, I don't think. there are a few episodes that people don't really like from season one, and sometimes obviously things just it's not done in a funny way. It was a roll of the dice in season one. You could either have a really fun and engaging episode, or you could have a really kind of poorly made one that doesn't portray the characters in a good light. And that was sort of like the gamble with a season one episode. You're like, oh, this could either be really good or really not.
Yeah, pretty much.
um, I mean, if we're going to talk about, yeah, so Lincoln in season one, if we're going to talk about his role in that season, he spent a lot of the time breaking the fourth wall, talking to the audience. Like, he'd share a lot of his experiences with us, the viewers. Um, what was your opinion on that, by the way? That was something you did a lot in the early episodes.
Uh, I feel like it worked so well. Like in the first season, I actually didn't mind it, and I think it did work. But like as the series went on, they started doing it like less and less,
Yeah.
which like I feel like fit more for like the later seasons if he didn't break the fourth wall, unless like he was the main focus. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Um, I suppose because he becomes less of a main focus or less of a sole protagonist in the later seasons, which we'll get to later. Um, yeah, it makes sense that they'd stop having him break the fourth wall all the time. Like in season one, he's like the one we're solely supposed to relate to. We're supposed to connect with him, and it's like the sisters are almost sort of like antagonists. A lot of the time, they'd be a collective antagonist. Like I've said this
Yeah.
before. Many episodes, because they have to fit in a 10 or 11 minute time slot, they just have all 10 siblings, regardless of whether or not it made sense for their individual personalities. They'd just be turned into like a hive mind mentality where they all act and think the same, and they'd all just serve to be one big antagonist for Lincoln. And yeah, that was very lazily done sometimes. It was very inconsistent. I mean,
Yeah,
not
that
that
was
the
one of my
writing,
least
yeah,
favorite things about like the first season.
yeah. Don't get me wrong, there's some inconsistencies in the show even now, but it's a lot less of a big deal than it used to be, I guess, because the show was very much written around Chris Savino's own personal experiences, and I almost get the feeling like Chris Savino might be a bit of a misogynist because the way he portrays the sisters in some episodes in seasons one and two, uh, it, it's like he was trying to get across this point, like, yeah, Lincoln is sometimes like being driven crazy by all this kind of almost insane sisters at times. I mean, just look at episodes like Study Muffin. You telling me he's not trying to make them look crazy there?
Yeah, that's insane.
It's like, yeah. So yeah, obviously Lincoln in the first season, he's very much your everyman, typical geek, doesn't really have that many specific interests or niches. Yeah, he's a serviceable character. He is interesting because you do find some of his struggles relatable. You do sort of even emphasize with him in some situations, like where he's really being screwed over. Of course, it can depend on episode to episode because sometimes he would cause his own problems, and sometimes it'll be a mix of the two, like in Brawl in the Family, for example, where the sisters are being unreasonable, but Lincoln also contributes to it himself, and it's like that. Again, that was just kind of a botched story from beginning to end, if I'm honest.
Yeah, right. But yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah, but have you got anything like sort of regarding Lincoln's dynamic with the sisters in seasons one and two? Have you got sort of anything else you want to add to that?
Um, no, not really. Not about season one, but
Yeah, I mean,
I
yeah,
pretty much covered it.
yeah, seasons one and two. I mean, it's pretty clear. Yeah, we've got it covered with what it is. Yeah, Lincoln was the everyman who was just the outnumbered one, and he was basically just a sort of reflection of Chris Savino's interpretation of how his own child had allegedly played out, and that's pretty much Lincoln's purpose in the first season and a half, I'd say. The first half of season two is still, for the most part, similar to season one. It's around the second half of season two where I think they started to change things a little bit. Interestingly, Chris Savino was still with the show at this point, but they were already sort of starting to go in a little bit of a different direction. I mean, with season two, Lincoln is still sort of the main character in every episode, but it's like it does focus a little bit more on some of the other sisters. For example, one of the earliest episodes I can think of, you have patching things up from season about mid season two. Lincoln and Clyde are in it in this kind of pointless subplot, but the main focus is very much Lana and Lola. Um,
Yeah.
and you also around the same time you had a couple of other episodes. Like I think there was Garage Band in this season, or was that season three? I'm trying to remember now.
No, that's season two.
Yeah, so that was an episode focused primarily on Laurie, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah.
And then you have an episode like Relative Chaos, The Loudest Mission, which focuses primarily on Ronnie Ann as the protagonist. Um, and there are a few other examples, like Spell It Out was focusing primarily on Lucy. So there were a few episodes around halfway through season two onwards where you start to think, okay, this is actually more of an episode focusing on this individual sister. Um,
Yeah, and I noticed like season two started to have a lot more like family centric episodes where it was like kind of more like the family working together or like the siblings working together, if that makes any sense.
yeah, so you have, for example, like Lock and Loud, where they're all working together to make the house more secure from people breaking in. So that would be a good example. And then
Yeah.
you'd have other episodes.
Or like
Um,
future tense as well, like
yeah, well, Future Tense is more about just like showing the siblings like getting into other things, like diversifying their interests essentially. Because a lot of them they do just have like one big niche. I mean, let's face it. After
right.
8 seasons, Luna still only has one niche.
Yeah. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, but yeah. So that was an interesting example. But yeah, you still have yeah, you have quite a few episodes where they're all working together. Like technically, Lina Takes All would be the family working together to combat Lin in all the board games.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
you'd
Also,
have
job insecurity is another one I thought of.
yeah, that's another good example. The first two acts of Read Aloud would be another good example. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah, because you've got the whole family working together to like read so many books to win that contest in the library, with only Lola like not participating. And then in the third act, obviously, it's them, Lincoln in particular, dealing with Lola.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so there are a few episodes and where they're all working together to achieve something. So yeah, you're right there. But also in the second half, yes, there are more episodes that focus on an individual sister rather than just Lincoln. And I think at the time, people actually like this. Like a lot of people now are like, I think no matter what the show does, there's going to be people who don't like the current creative direction, because it's kind of interesting. People in the early seasons said, "Oh, we need to see more of the individual sisters and what they're doing in their day-to-day lives." And then when the show started doing that, it's like, "Oh, but there's not enough Lincoln now." And it's like, "Oh, yeah,
Yeah. No one's ever gonna be completely
yeah."
satisfied.
I mean, it's one of those. I mean, this show has a very difficult task to be able to really please everybody, because there's so many characters. There's such a great big world that it's creating at this point. Um,
But
it
I
is
think
going
that's
to
one
be
of the things I
hard.
love about the show the most is like the amount of like different types of episodes they can do.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
I mean, that is interesting. I mean, did I show you that thing I did recently where I said, if you had the ideal, like, how much of a percentage the show should focus on this aspect, if that makes... Did I show you that? I
Yeah,
think
I
I
remember
did.
that you did.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, that I think most people generally agreed with that when they saw it, so, yeah.
Yeah, I agreed with most of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of those. I mean, you can go into other things. Like, for example, a lot of people hate the fantasy elements, but then again, they liked No Time to Spy and the Casagrandes movie from last year. You telling me they don't have fantastical elements in them? It's like,
Yeah, they did have broadcast. Yeah.
I mean, the Casagrandes movie is quite possibly like the pinnacle of fantastical narratives within the entire franchise. So there you go. Like, you've got actual gods and demonic beings and stuff and everything in there, magic. And it's like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And like shape shifting and all that.
Yes, it's like that's like going to be like the most surreal story this franchise has ever done, and people liked it. So there you go. And again, I suppose it's because it's a movie, you can sort of get away with it a bit more there. Maybe I did sort of
Who knows?
propose maybe with the fantastical elements, and yes, this is a bit of a tangent, guys. Sorry. Um, they could reserve that for like season premieres and finales. Um, Maybe that could work because then it makes sense for those like bigger and grander scale stories if they're like finales and premieres to a season, and then you can like keep most of the stuff in between, like slice of life. Maybe that's a thing they could do.
Oh yeah, maybe like a special like for the
Yeah,
first episode and like last episode
yeah, and then
with
like
like
everything
some
else
big
in between
stories.
can be just like normal slice of life stuff, and then maybe that could work.
Yeah, I could see that working actually.
Yeah, that's what the MLP series did. So maybe the Loud House could do that. But anyway, going back to Lincoln. So yeah, seasons 1 and 2, he was the main character. Towards the end of season 2, he did let his sisters take a bit more of a front seat in some episodes. And then in season 3 was when you really start to see him take a bit more of a back seat. He's still there. He's still got a big presence. He's still the main
Right.
character in quite a few episodes. Like, for example, in White Hair, what would Lincoln do, and so on, But obviously, he wasn't like the sole main character anymore. All the sisters, well, all the main family members, and even a few of the side characters like Clyde, you could argue are all the shared main character at this point. Season 3 doesn't really have a main character, if that makes sense. It's like, it just depends on the episode.
Yeah, he wasn't really like I feel like a lot of his episodes this season were like with Clyde, I think.
Yeah, this
Like
was
most of
around the
them.
period. Yeah, well, to be fair, there were Clink and McClyde episodes as early as season 1, like Roughing It, for
Right.
example. But yeah, Lincoln and Clyde. This was around season 3 was the time they started to do more Lincoln and Friends episodes, but they weren't done that regularly, so there was still a lot of just Lincoln and Clyde. And I will
The
say
only one
this,
I remember from the season was Past Your Bedtime, where it was like a Lincoln and Friends episode.
yeah.
But I'm trying to think of other ones from the season,
Did
but
didn't Stella debut in this season?
oh yeah, she did.
Yeah,
They Sell My Heart.
because they did the White Hair episode first, where she's like a cameo character, as like yeah, and then obviously later that same season they did Be Still in My Heart, which I think was just after Past Your Bedtime, because I don't think she was in that one. So that was technically a Lincoln and Friends episode, and obviously that ended up being a very significant episode because Stella would join the group permanently from there on out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there were a couple of Lincoln and Friends episodes, but yes, there was still a lot of Lincoln and Clyde exclusive stories, like Game Boys, for example. Um,
Oh yeah, Tears
but
for Fears.
yeah, so there were some like Clink. It was a very much a Clink and McCloud. In terms of Lincoln's presence in this season, a lot of it was him with Clyde, like Clink and McCloud episodes. Even like when they share it with a sister, for example, Middlemen. I mean, it heavily features Lynn Jr., but Lincoln and Clyde are still kind of the protagonists of it. Liz's just sort of the one who comes and helps him out, and she does surprisingly get some character development in the end. But it was still a Clink and McCloud episode, really, when you really think about it.
Yeah, there was a lot in this season.
So yeah, Lincoln mainly has he's mainly interacting more with Clyde and his friends now. And obviously, this would be a sign of things to come in season 5 and onwards, because that would become a big deal in the later seasons. But season 3 was when that really started to happen, because now he's no longer the main character. And also, the show was starting to go more in the direction of episodes where there'd be a particular sibling and their friends. And now, don't get me wrong, that's fine to a point. I mean, it's a good way to expand the world you've built and do some things with the supporting characters. But at the same time, I will say you do want to keep a good level of focus on the family as well. And that's easier said than
Right.
done, especially now because there's so many characters. But it is important to
Yeah.
try and get that balance right, and that's always been something the show has struggled with to a point.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so in season 3, Lincoln has a much lesser focus than the previous 2 seasons because he's no longer the sole protagonist. You get a lot of episodes from season 3 where, like, Luna got quite a lot of episodes this season, which is fair enough because she didn't really get any in season 2.
Oh yeah, she did.
And you get episodes like about Lin Jr. and episodes about Luan and Lola and so on. I think the only one who doesn't get a lot is Lana. It's been pointed out before that she only gets Scales of Justice in season 3. She's very underutilized in this particular season, but season 4 would make up for that with her. But yeah, I think season 3, for the most part, aside from that, actually has a very good balancing of focus between all the different sisters. So everyone like gets a lot of great narrative focus this season. It doesn't focus too much on any one particular thing. Like season 5, as good as it is, focuses maybe a bit too much on Lincoln's friends at points and on Flip. I mean, I don't know why they
Oh.
need to focus on Flip all the time. But there you go. Yeah,
Yeah, and the balance of like character focus is one of the main reasons I like season 3 so much. So
absolutely. Yeah, but
season
obviously,
6 did a pretty good job with that as well.
yeah. So yeah, season 3 is generally considered to be the favorite, like the fan favorite. Everybody loves it, which is interesting because it was around this same time where they started to do more episodes about Lincoln and his friends and less about the family and less about Lincoln as the main character, which are all things that people complain about. But season 3 was really where that all started to happen. But obviously, I guess in this instance, it's still focusing on the family as a whole. Like almost every episode is still about at least one or two family members. Sometimes the whole, all of them as a whole. Whereas in later
Right.
seasons, maybe it's the fact that there's too many side character episodes that people don't like. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, that could be why, but I don't know.
but yeah, so going back to Lincoln, yeah, he has a much lower level of focus in season 3, but that's kind of our design, and it is fine because he still gets some solid episodes when he is the main focus. Again, Middleman was one of my favourite episodes from season 3, and technically Lincoln is still the main character of that one. And again,
Yeah.
he's still an interesting sort of character. You can sort of like he's a character who sort of struggles because he feels not only outnumbered but also sort of overshadowed by his sisters because they're all so great at their particular fields. They're all very popular. They all have like these niches that they're really pursuing and really excelling at, and I guess he feels a bit overshadowed and would I say unsuccessful? I don't know. Maybe that's the
Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
yeah, I
it's
feel
sort
that
of
way.
it's sort of a struggle that he's dealt with since the early seasons. Like even in the movie, the first movie, is basically all about him feeling overshadowed by his sisters and having this big break when it turns out he's the Duke of some place in Scotland. And it's like okay, which would have came out not too long. That came out around season 4 or 5, didn't it? Um,
Yeah, I think like season 5. Yeah.
so going straight to season 4, again, it's most of the same. Lincoln and Friends do get a few more episodes this season. This is where they started to dive away from Clink and McLeod and towards the friend group as a whole, which, to be fair, is beneficial. There have been Lincoln and Clyde episodes since the very beginning of the show, and I guess you could say that the Lincoln and Friends episodes replaced those for the most part.
Yeah,
And I
pretty
will
much.
say, look, in fairness, as much as I think they're sometimes overused in certain seasons, Lincoln and Friends is preferable to just Lincoln and Clyde because part of the problem with Lincoln and Clyde in the first few seasons was that they're too similar. They're like 90% the same or 95% the same in personality. In fact, no, I think in one episode they said they're 98% similar, and it's like, wow, really?
That's crazy.
What was
Yeah,
the episode? Was it the episode Room with a Feud? I think it might have been that one where
yeah, it
they all
was. They did the like,
they swap rooms with each other, all the sisters.
yeah,
Um,
they did that like compatibility test thing, and
yeah, and they
it
did
was
it
enough
based
to
on
like push
because Lincoln and
everything.
Clyde did a compatibility thing in a magazine, and it said, "Oh, we're 98% the same." It's like, guys, you're basically admitting to your main problem with Lincoln and Clyde, for God's sake. Ugh.
Yeah, but the Lincoln and Friends episodes I feel are just like more interesting
Well, yeah,
because
because you've
yeah, like
got
there's more different personalities to like bounce off of each other.
absolutely, yeah, because they're all so different. They can work off each other a lot better, and they have more interesting interactions. With Lincoln and Clyde, it's like, yeah, there's a few little minor differences there, but for the most part, they're very similar. They have the same interests. They think the same on a lot of things. I guess you could argue Clyde's a little bit more neurotic and maybe a little bit more nervous about things, easily freaks out. But otherwise, he's basically the same as Lincoln. Um, yeah, there's not
Yeah,
that much of a difference between them. So when you have far more I guess, defined and individual personalities. Like Rusty is nothing like anyone else in the group. Liam is nothing like anyone else in the group. And because they're all so different in their own individual ways, I will say that does make for better Lincoln centric episodes because now he's got a bigger group of characters, of different characters that he can work off in his day to day interactions. And that is absolutely beneficial. I'm not saying they should have like half of the episodes of the show be about them, like in season 5, for example. But yes, it is preferable to Lincoln having a friend group as opposed to Lincoln McLeod. And I will say in the later seasons, the episodes involving them do get like better in terms of like their plots and everything, how fun they are to see. I will say going to middle school and going to that more cynical sort of environment where things are a lot more interesting in many ways, did benefit them as well. It gave them more sort of to do, more stuff to react to and interact with in the world that they inhabit, if that makes sense.
yeah, and it gave like the writers more story ideas because it's like a new environment. It's like
Yeah,
there's just more
yeah.
opportunities for like, yeah,
And while it was season 5 where that really kicked off, it was season 4 where that started to happen more. So you do get more episodes about Lincoln and his friends in this season. Because obviously now they've got like Stella there as well. They've basically got a full team, a full group. Saying that, there were still a few Lincoln McLeod episodes this season, like Rocket Man, Last Loud on Earth, Kings of the Con, for example. Um, but they do mix it up more with episodes about the group. For example, Brave the Last Dance, while the Clyde episode does focus on the group as a whole. Um, I think Tough
Remember Tales of
Cookies,
Woe was pretty good.
yeah, Tough Cookies starts as a Lincoln and Clyde episodes, but the friends become involved later on. And there was the episode where I can't remember the name now. The one where it involves Stella. What's the name of it?
Wait, Tales of Woe,
Yeah, I think that was the
was it
one.
that one?
Yeah, I think that's the one
Yeah,
I'm trying to
that
think
one was
of.
good.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Stella's Music Box. So there were a few more. Season 4 has a mix of Lincoln and Clyde episodes and Lincoln and Friends episodes. And to be honest, I think the Lincoln and Friends episodes were a bit more interesting than just the Lincoln and Clyde episodes. Um, I mean, the second half of Kings of the Con was quite fun, but that's because of the sisters involved more than anything else, really. I think season 4 is where people realise, yeah, Lincoln and Clyde, they're kind of like a weak link now. Just do more episodes with the friend group. Because, yeah, Lincoln and Clyde on their own are a little bit boring, to be honest. Um,
Yeah, I can
yeah.
see that.
It's
True.
weird because in season 4, they also started the Casagrandes around that time, and they introduced
Oh,
Sid
yeah,
Chang.
true.
And it's like, wow, Ronnie Ann and Sid already have a far more interesting dynamic than Lincoln and Clyde.
Yeah,
Mainly because they're
there's
not the
that.
same character.
Yeah, they're very different from each other.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, their friendship dynamic, like the two of clubs from a very early episode of the Casagrandes, is already a more compelling episode than practically any Clink and McLeod episode on it, like with just them two. And it's like, yeah, it just goes to show. But I think that's why, yeah, Lincoln in season 3 and 4, I guess you could say like his character, it was still fine, but again, I guess not that they don't do that much with his character in seasons 3 and 4. Like he has some solid
Yeah, they don't.
episodes, but I guess you could say like in seasons 1 and 2, at the very least, because he's the main focus, there's a lot like you can. He has a lot of struggles you can emphasize with. He learns a lot of things. He is relatable because of the situations he's facing. In seasons 3 and 4, I wouldn't say he's an afterthought, but he's not. They don't do that much. They don't take him in like many new, interesting directions, if that makes sense. Like, yes, they start doing more episodes with his friend group, but other than that, I guess
Yeah, they
his
didn't do much with his character like itself. Like
no,
he had like episodes, but they didn't do much with his
no.
character.
Like I will say, like once they do roll around to season 5, and they have like the 3 month time skip that they do. and he goes to middle school, and he starts. At that point, they started doing a bit more with him. Like they started developing his individual interests. For example, his interest in magic would start to get a bit more plot relevant sometimes, and obviously they start making more interesting episodes about him and his friends. Um, and that sort of really came around in season 5 and 6. So yeah, in seasons 5, yeah, like for example, season 5 begins with School, which obviously is a big Lincoln centric special, which deals with his. If we say the first 2 seasons of the Loud House dealt with his struggles at home, season 5 very much deals with his struggles at school. And School is like the big kick-off of all that. So obviously he's got to deal with bully. That Chandler is back as his like main bully at this point because that wasn't even a thing before season 5, really.
Yeah, not
And he's
really.
got a sort of douchebag teacher, Mr. Bolhoffner. Lynn Jr. for some reason is causing him trouble, even though middlemen happen. But there you go. You've got he's obviously just dealing with a very sort of problematic and cynical middle school environment. And he's also separated from all his friends who are in a different class to him, which makes things a bit worse for the kid. But there you go. And he's very much he's dealing with a sort of situation that mirrors his struggles in early season 1. Except this time, instead of the sisters creating the problems for him, it's everyone and everything happening in middle school.
Yeah, which I think was like a good change because it just made it more interesting and different
Well, I
compared to
guess
like the
because
earlier
at this
seasons.
point in the show, the sisters were all their own individual personalities. They weren't just a hive mind anymore. They weren't just there to serve as a collective antagonist. They've got their own stories, their own stuff going on. So if you are going to give
Exactly.
Lincoln that sort of struggle to deal with again, you've got to do it in a different way. You've got to. It has to manifest in a new direction. And I guess they decided, right, let's put him and his friends in middle school, so now he can deal with all the harsh stuff that Lynn Jr. warned him about in season 3.
Yeah.
Which is
I
weird because
actually
it's
really
like,
like
yeah,
his character a lot in like starting season 5 and 6, like what they were doing with his character, like
yeah,
especially with his like different interests and things like it with magic, and then
yeah,
also like they showed more of his interest in like David Steele and stuff.
yeah.
So I
Well,
think
to be
those
fair, he
episodes
had
were
an
good.
interest in Ace Savvy in the earlier seasons, and it's very similar. It's like they're both sort of like characters who are action detectives. Like Ace Savvy's more like a Batman, whereas David Steele's more of a James Bond. I mean, he even made a James Bond parody movie not too long ago. So it's like, yeah. Um, but that's yeah. So obviously they went from Ace Savvy to David Steele, and I guess that is an interesting thing because yeah, I guess Kings of the Con because it was considered very controversial. They decided to go in a new direction with that whole thing and decided, you know what, Lincoln's getting older. Maybe he does decide he's putting Ace Savvy on the back burner, and we're going to give him a new thing that he's into. And he's basically a little James Bond wannabe kid.
Yeah.
What's interesting is obviously one of the first instances of him being into David Steele was in the episode Family Bonding, where he actually does save America from a legit evil spy family.
Oh yeah, that episode is great. Like I didn't expect like the ending at all in that episode.
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing.
It
Like, you
was crazy.
expect it to play out exactly as it would. Lincoln was wrong. He looks like an idiot. Everyone berates him. The end. But then it turns out, oh, they're actually spies, and he actually beats them in quite a cool and badass sequence. And you're like, oh, they actually threw the dog a bone here.
It was different for
Yeah,
like
but
an
it was
episode.
kind of a really cool moment just because you're like, oh, they actually went this way. You just almost expect, yes, this is going to be a big misunderstanding. But then they think, no, we're going to swerve you. And it is pretty well done, to be fair.
Yeah, it was a good twist that like I don't really like watch a lot of episodes where like I'll see like a twist like that or something I didn't
Yeah,
like see coming.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. So, I mean, so that I suppose that episode also is another Clinton McCloud episode. So there are still Lincoln and Clyde centric episodes, even in the later seasons. It's just less common. But yes, they do start doing more with his David Steele interest. And they do, to be fair, they do a lot more with that than they ever really did with Ace Savvy. I mean, apart from Kings of the Con, I think there's that other episode where they're learning that it's fine to get older and still be into it. Apart from those two instances, they didn't really do a lot where They didn't like expand much on his interest in Ace Savvy. It was just like a sort of quirk or interest that he had. Whereas with David Steele, they have done a lot more with that. They've made that the main focal point of a lot of episodes, plus an entire movie.
Yeah, whole movie.
Well, I mean, it was more to do with Myrtle, but they did utilise Lincoln's interest in David Steele,
Right.
obviously, to make that work.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so with Lincoln, they do a lot of changes. I say mostly positive ones in the later seasons. Again, because he's now interacting more with his friends, that makes more interesting stories in general and just better character interactions. His change to David Steele, I think, honestly, looking back, was a good change because they seem to have found more to do with this interest. And also, yeah, like we said, he's also got in stuff like magic tricks. Although that is kind of redundant considering Lucy and the Morticians Club can do actual magic now, but there you go.
Yeah.
You always think that there'd be an episode where to become a better like stage magic performer, he'd get Lucy and the Morticians to actually do like real spells. You almost think that's going to be an episode they do at some point.
Maybe. I feel like that would work on.
Yeah. I mean, they just had an episode with Rusty and Morpheus that nobody had asked for, and that was that. To be fair, that was a bit of a weird episode, to be honest. I didn't. I
That
don't
was a
think.
very random like premise.
Yeah, like it's just, and it didn't really work. It's just I didn't really like that episode that much. But there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it? But yeah, going back to Lincoln. So yeah, seasons 5 and 6 were where you get these big changes in like what direction they're taking his character in. And season 6 will basically just continue what season 5 started with. So it begins with Present Danger, which is sure enough a Lincoln, a David Steele centric episode. So there you go. And again, in these seasons, he's still not really the main character in the same way he was back in season 1. But he does get quite a lot of focus in these seasons. He's not like, you could argue in seasons 3 and 4, as good as they are, he is put on the back burner a little bit. But in this era of the show, I think maybe they get the right amount of focus for him. He's not the sole main character anymore, but he does still have quite a lot of presence in these seasons, I guess you could say.
Yeah, he does definitely.
Like in season 6, not only has he got Present Danger, he's also the main character in Save Royal Woods, and Taunting Hour, Musical Chairs. He's still like got a big role in this season. And also, while him and his friends do have a lot of episodes, it's not as overbearing as season 5. And I think that's part of the reason why we said like season 6 is one of the best seasons of the show, right up there with season 3. Because it just seems to, for the most part, get the balancing of focus really well. And that includes Lincoln. He gets plenty of good episodes in this season.
Yeah, I feel like he got better episodes this season than even season 3. Like,
Well, yeah. Well,
yeah.
season 3 is actually one of the episodes he gets the least episodes.
Yep.
But then again, that's fine because that was bad. That was so precariously balancing so many different characters. And he still does get a few episodes. Don't get me wrong; he's not like completely like left out or anything. But yes, I suppose in season 6 you could argue him and his friends do get a fair few episodes, but just enough to not be too many. Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I
it
won't
was
lie.
better balance in season 5.
There are some of like the Lincoln and Friends episodes, which are some of the relatively weaker episodes from this season. Like Save the Last Pants is fine, but nothing special. And you get a couple of episodes about them where I'm like, yeah, okay, this is fine. Again, Scoop Snoop is fine. All the Rage is fine. But they're not like the standouts of the season, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there were better ones than that.
Yeah, if you would talk about standouts from season 6, then they'd definitely be some of the sister episodes.
Yeah.
Like Love Stinks would be up there. Ignoring the fact that it doesn't work within the wider context, No Escape is a great episode. That would be up there. I mean, we did a whole podcast about this, so I won't go into it. But yeah. So yeah, both of us already listed our top 5 favourites from season 6. So there's plenty of great episodes from this season. The thing is, I'm not sure if any of them were Lincoln centric ones. I don't.
I
Yeah,
remember Lights, Camera, Nuclear Reaction was pretty good.
yeah. There are
That
some
was
good.
more like a Lincoln and Clyde episode though.
Yeah. Well, at this point, I'd consider Lincoln and Clyde episodes the same as Lincoln episodes. Let's face it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like I said, the Clyde is basically just another Lincoln. He's like got himself as a sidekick, essentially. That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
Um, so then, yeah, season 6 does Lincoln pretty well. It does him justice. Season 7, I guess with season 7, I don't actually remember that much. Like he obviously had some episodes. They did do like an episode focusing on his magic with Master of Delusion. Um,
Yeah.
So they do some decent things with his character. Obviously, he's present for the entire road trip arc, which was this season. Um, Again, they do some decent things with him. I wouldn't say like they like really go in any great new interesting directions with his character. They just sort of continue what seasons 5 and 6 were doing, but maybe a little bit less. Um,
Yeah, I can't
Pretty
really think of
much.
anything that was
Like
different from
there's
the
not
previous season.
yeah, there's not really that much new that I'd say they do with his character. One thing I will say is, ever since he did move to middle school, I think they've done more like he's had more like normal, casual interactions with Lynn Jr. in particular. They've been hanging out a lot more in a lot of scenes in certain episodes. If you've noticed that,
Oh yeah, kind of.
like even in episodes that don't really focus on them, like Hiccups and Downs, they're just sort of like randomly coming up with some plan for Luna together. Um,
Oh
Maybe,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Like you do see a lot more of them just like casually hanging out. Like for example, in the episode "Can't Learn 'Em All," which was season 7, we see her and Lincoln like hang out watching wrestling together, which you never would have normally seen them doing in the earlier seasons.
Yeah, definitely. Not. I remember also Dis the Cook. They kind of
Yeah.
were
Well,
like
that was a
together
plot
in
about
that.
them two together, and that was quite interesting because it's like as much as I did like Lincoln and Friends episodes over Clink and McCloud episodes, there was the criticism there were a few too many episodes about them, and obviously Dis the Cook was considered one of the standouts of season 5 because it didn't do the same thing. You expect it to be just a Lincoln episode, but it's like, oh, we're actually finally making use of the fact that Lincoln is in the same school as his big sister and they're doing something in the middle school together. Great.
Yeah, I like that. It was very different, especially for that season.
Yeah, so it's like, and that was a really great episode that just had them two interacting quite well with each other. Because let's face it, ever since No Such Luck, really, there's always been this sort of thing where, like, apparently they're enemies according to the fan base. It's like, no, they're not, for God's sake.
No, no.
That was just a bad episode. Forget about that, move on, yeah.
People are so over dramatic. I don't know.
I know. I really. I really hate how things have turned out with this fandom and everything, but there you go.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah. It is what it is. But anyway, yeah, so Lincoln, he does get like more casual moments with Lynn Jr. In the more recent seasons, and even to a point with some of his other sisters. But yeah, Lynn Jr. in particular, because I do think like the earlier seasons, they didn't seem that close a lot of the time, whereas now they're like, it is showing them more like just hanging out together, and it is kind of cool to see that. Just a little subtle thing that most people wouldn't notice that much, but obviously Lynn fans do. Uh,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, so Lincoln is season 7. Otherwise, like yeah, he has some solid episodes here and there, but they don't really do anything new. They just sort of continue what the previous 2 seasons were doing with him. Again, he has some solid episodes, you know, but I wouldn't say like they don't do anything brilliant. I mean, he has some good supporting roles in certain episodes, like in Dread of the Class. He's present in that, working with Ronnie Ann to sort of
Oh
combat
yeah.
Luan, the pranking master, and that was a really fun episode.
Yeah, but I can't really think of anything like different, especially like
No,
compared
I
to like
think
season
they
six.
contribute to his character in small, subtle ways more than anything else in season 7. I think is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And then obviously you finally get to season 8, which we've just had. Shorter seasons, so there's less to talk about. Um, again, he doesn't get that. He doesn't actually get that many focal episodes, but the ones he does get are very good. Like Stealing Thunder, which I'm a little bit disappointed didn't have a bit more of Lynn Jr. in it, but whatever. What the struggle that Lincoln and Clyde deal with is quite relatable here. Again, they do sort of like get all the praise, and it's like, again, this sort of relates back to the fact that Lincoln feels a bit overshadowed by his sisters. Because when he takes credit for Lynn Jr. being his stunt double in that movie they made, and he's like, I really don't want to let this go. And it's kind of interesting because the episode doesn't, like, Chandler doesn't actually succeed in like revealing that Lincoln was faking. Like, they actually do manage to keep up the lie and retain like the credit and the praise they were getting, which was kind of an interesting thing to do. Normally, episodes like this would really make use of the liar revealed writing trope, but this episode actually did go a different direction to that, which was interesting. So he doesn't have that many focal episodes this season because it's a short season, but I think the ones he does get are generally very good. Like, obviously, he becomes the main focus, well, him and his family in a Night to Remember, which was a really, really good episode.
Yeah.
Again,
That one's really good.
yeah, and obviously him and his friends have an episode with Carol's Whisper, which was pretty solid. He doesn't actually have that much to do in season 8, thinking about it. I mean, he obviously is, him and his friends do have Close Encounters of the Nerd kind, which was alright. I liked it, I didn't love it. It had, I don't know, it dragged on a bit for me, but there you go.
Yeah, I didn't care for it. Like, it was long, but I don't remember like much from it.
Yeah, like it has like it's an 8 episode that like has aliens, and to be honest, that was a bit muddled up as well because like you have the aliens like capture all these kids and stuff, and they're going to use them for fuel or something, and everyone just sort of lets them off the hook. It's like, oh, you've just done all that, but it's all right. You just go. And it's like, okay.
That's kind of weird.
Like, yeah, it's just, that episode was just a little bit weird looking at. I know Amanda Leoy really doesn't like that one.
Oh, yeah.
She's not a big fan of Close Encounters of the Nerd kind. She's made that very clear. I think she's someone who doesn't really like the surreal direction of the show sometimes. She likes the more down-to-earth slice of life episodes, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, there isn't that much of Lincoln like in season 8, but what we do get is quite good when he is the main focus. Like he was the main focus in that Greece episode in the Europe road trip arc as well. That one was all right. Again, had a few good moments.
It was okay, but I wouldn't say it was like the best of like, the road trip arc.
What would you say is your favourite of the European road trip arc?
Either A Night to Remember or the Transylvania one. I forgot what it was called.
Yeah.
Transylvania.
To be honest, I did actually like almost like, even though it only had 5 episodes, and I wish there would have been a bit more. I think the episodes we got were generally very strong. A Night to Remember was quite fun. Not perfect, but very fun. None of Your Business was more interesting than I expected it to be because it was more of an action-packed episode than we thought it was going to be.
I didn't expect.
I really liked Alpining Away because it was just funny, like seeing like Lynn Jr. of all people like getting romantic after all these years.
I love that one too.
A Bite in Transylvania, that was alright. It was basically one of those misunderstanding episodes where they think they're vampires but they're not, sort of thing. Or
I feel like with this one, it was like I couldn't really tell like what the outcome was going to be
because they would do that. They have ghosts and stuff and magic and gods in it now.
Yeah, so it's exactly. Like they've been doing that more. So
they could easily have them be vampires. In fact, I'm surprised. Have there been any actual vampires show up in it yet?
I don't think so, but like I just thought like, are they gonna be vampires? Because like it seems like something they would do.
Like I could almost see like. I remember there was this. This is a completely random tangent, by the way. I remember that. Do you know the user on DeviantArt, Cartoon Fan 2018? I think I've shown you a few pictures of his before. He takes like images, he edits them up to show like loud characters fighting each other and stuff. but
Oh yeah, I do
he did
remember
a
that.
picture of do you know of the Buzz Lightyear cartoon from like 2000? You probably don't, a bit before your time.
I think I've heard of it, but I don't know.
Buzz Lightyear a Star Command. And there was a robotic energy vampire from that series. And Cartoon Fan, he did this like picture where Lisa has brought that robot vampire Nose 482 back to life for Lucy as like some sort of surreal friend she can have. And I'm like, I'm surprised the show hasn't introduced something like that, like a robotic vampire or something. And it's like, because that would be a great way to have a Lisa and Lucy episode. Thinking about it,
Yeah, that
they
see
have
that
to deal
happening
with that, and
actually.
it's like it makes sense because a robot is something Lisa is into, and obviously Lucy is into vampires and stuff. So that could easily be a great antagonist for both of them to go up against. Obviously, it would have to be a different original version. They couldn't just bring that character back. He's from an old Disney cartoon, but yeah,
I can see that happening.
yeah. But I'm surprised there hasn't been like an actual vampire in the shows. Yeah, I don't think there has anyway. I can't. Maybe there has. I can't remember. But yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
wouldn't be surprised though if they did have like a
at this
like an
point,
actual vampire
you've got
show.
spies. You've got living trash monsters who as far back as season one actually. You've got magic spells. You've got monsters. You've got gods in it. I mean, like at this point, why not vampires? You've got ghosts. Why not vampires?
Yeah.
But yeah, but then again, some people might not like that because they hate the fantastical elements. So there you go. Um, Again, like I said, I don't mind them as long as they're done well and not too much. But yeah, obviously, I do like having a lot of slice of life episodes as well.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, there's not much else you can really say about Lincoln. I think overall, yeah, season by season, he's had varying levels of character focus and development. I think overall, he is an interesting character. You do find his struggles relatable, and what his struggles are have changed over time. He used to deal with his sisters. He still does occasionally deal with his sisters. Like there was that episode where he's got to wash all the clothes of like his some of his sisters, and he's also the one where he's got to like borrow money from them and stuff like that. But I say more of his struggles now are to do with like his talents and his middle school life. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anything else you'd like to say about Lincoln's character before we wrap this up?
Mm, no, not really.
Okay. So obviously, yeah, Lincoln's the main character. He's had a lot of focal episodes, some better than others, but I think overall he is an interesting character, and he is generally pretty likable. Again, he has his vices, like he can be a bit selfish sometimes, but again, he's a kid, and he has a lot more, I think, things you could admire about him than not. They do sometimes make him out to be like the sort of geeky loser at times, but I think there are enough moments in the episodes where he like triumphs or overcomes odds that you can sort of root for him. They don't go too
Right.
far with that whole dynamic, for example. Um, yeah, I think overall he is a fun character. He started out maybe a little bit boring, but he has got more interesting over time. And
Yeah, he's a really good protagonist.
yeah, one
Definitely.
thing I will say is like just it is a little bit distracting when you go from watching an episode from one season to an episode of the next because every
Oh yeah.
season he gets a new voice actor, and it's like, yeah, that's something we haven't
Oh,
really touched on
that
because
as
they
well.
won't
Yeah.
just get a girl to voice him. It's like,
Yeah, like I can tell like who's who most of the time. Like they don't really sound the same to me. Like they each have their own like
yeah,
distinct voice, so it's kind of like a different
yeah,
Lincoln like
just
every season.
like you could easily get a girl character to give him a voice that sounds reasonably similar to the ones he's already had. Um, like they still have his original voice actor Grant Palmer. I think was he the original one, the one from
Yeah, he
season
was.
one, because he voices the guy who sometimes works in the Burping Burger. And then I
Yeah, he
think
does.
Grant. I think they actually named him Grant, and I think he now works at Lynn's table. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong there. You know what I mean? Like the teenager, the the blonde haired
Yeah.
curly haired teenage guy who works at like in some restaurants and stuff.
Yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah, and like I think he's voiced by Lincoln's original voice actor,
Right.
so he's stuck around in a very like basic capacity since season one, but obviously he's not like the main character anymore.
Yeah, I think he's like the only voice actor, like previous voice actor of Lincoln that's still like on the show.
It's like, why don't they just give him a girl voice actor? You know, it would just make sense. You wouldn't have to change him every season because they keep having their voices break.
I think they want to like I don't know. The only thing I can think of is that like maybe they want his voice to be more like authentically close to like a kid.
Well,
But that's like the
maybe,
only
but
thing I can think of.
I don't. I guess, but then they don't do that with all the other characters. So it's like, yeah, like it's more distracting the fact that they reused the sisters for some of his friends. Like again, Zach sounds almost identical to Lynn, like maybe a tiny bit deeper, but because Lynn's voice is already quite deep for a girl because she's a tomboy, it's like Zach and Lynn almost have the exact same voice. And
Yeah, sometimes I've like had like the show on and like I've heard like one of their voices and I thought it was like I thought like Zach was like Lynn.
yeah,
And then I looked and it wasn't.
and then to a lesser extent, you've got Laura Jill Miller as both Lisa and Liam. Although because they have different pronunciations, like Lincoln talks like a country farm, sorry, Liam talks like a country farm boy, and obviously Lisa talks like a sort of sophisticated scientist. There is a bit more vocal distinction, but the actual voices obviously sound similar. Yeah,
Yeah, they do. But they sound different enough.
yeah,
Like
because of
especially
how
Laura.
the words are spoken. Because Liam has a certain way he says his words, it is more
Yeah.
distinguishable. But even still, it's like yes, they have similar voices, and it's obvious. It's like I'd say that's more distracting than like just giving Lincoln a girl's voice because let's face it, he has kind of a feminine sounding voice anyway because he is a bit effeminate. So it's like giving it just having a girl voice in would be fine. Like
Yeah, that could
all
work
these
because
years
a lot
later,
of like
yeah.
yeah.
Like Bart Simpson's been voiced by a girl for like 30 plus years, and all these years later, nobody cares. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of like kid characters that are voiced by
Well, yeah,
like
Tara Strong does a lot of
people
them, doesn't she? Like, yeah,
like Timmy Turner maybe
Timmy
like
Turner and Omi and so on. You know, she's made like a career out of doing that, really. But yeah, it's like it's a common thing in cartoons. So why do they have to do this thing with Lincoln where they got to change his voice every season? It's like just give him a girl, you know.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe eventually, but who knows?
Well, at this point, you know, might as well not bother. Yeah, but I don't know how many more seasons this show will last. I think it's got to be nearing its end now. Um, I'd
I don't know
imagine.
if they've announced like a 10th season or anything.
Yeah, I don't know. At this point, I really don't know. Um, but yeah. So yeah, I think we said all we need to say about Lincoln. Yeah, yeah, good character. In some seasons, more than others, he gets more to do. But he is a good enough protagonist. So yeah, there you have it. What about you guys all listening? What do you think? Do you like Lincoln as a character? Do you think he's fun, likable, relatable? You know, would you change anything about his character? Let us know in the comment section below. And thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.